Amit, you there? Okay. Hello, everyone. First of all, wishing you all a very happy new year and welcome to our webinar series on .NET. Starting this week, we will be hosting webinars on .NET, Visual Studio, AngularJS, and several other topics at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So my name is Noor Basha, Senior Marketing Manager at Winwire Technologies, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Before we start, let me highlight a few housekeeping items. During the webinar, please feel free to post questions and we will try to answer as many as we can at the end. A recording of this session will be shared to you in next 24 to 48 hours. So today's topic for the session is building modern web apps using ASP.NET 5. So before we get started, let me introduce you to today's presenter. Amit is the Director of Cloud and Mobility at Winwire Technologies, and he has over 15 years of experience in the IT industry and is a Microsoft Azure certified developer. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Amit. Amit, over to you. Amit, looks like you are on mute. We can't hear you.
Noor, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Okay, sure. Hello, everybody. Sorry about the disturbance. So myself, I'm Amit Dubey. I'm Director for Cloud and Mobility Business at Winwire Technologies. And I'll be walking you through the webinar on building modern web applications using ASP.NET 5. So the agenda for today's session is I'll be giving an introduction to ASP.NET 5, what it is all about, how it works. And then we're going to talk about the improvements that we get by using ASP.NET 5. And then I'll talk on a very high level about what is DNX and how it works with ASP.NET 5. And then I'm going to talk about the project structure of a typical ASP.NET 5 application. And then at the end of it, we'll have a question and answer session where you can ask any questions about ASP.NET 5 that you have. And I'll be happy to answer any of those. So with that, let's begin the session. So ASP.NET 5 is a new open source on cross-platform framework for building modern cloud-based web applications. So as you see here in the diagram, like there is ASP.NET 4.6 and then there is ASP.NET 5. The previous versions of ASP.NET, they used to run on .NET framework, as you know, so the latest one being 4.6. And then comes the new version, which is ASP.NET 5. Now if you see, this overlaps between .NET Framework 4.6 and .NET Core 5. Now this is a very important step because your .NET Core 5 is a subset of the larger .NET Framework, which can run on various other operating systems other than Windows. So .NET Framework was designed for Windows, but .NET Core actually can run on a Linux or a Mac operating system as well. So what this means to you is that you can use ASP.NET 5 to build web applications not only for Windows, but also for other operating systems such as Mac or Linux. So that gives you a lot of flexibility of building modern web applications that can run on any platform. So basically you're building cross-platform web applications. And it also gives you the flexibility that you don't have to host it on IIS, and you can also self-host it. So that's in core about ASP.NET 5 and how it is different from previous versions of ASP.NET. And ASP.NET 5 is completely open source. You can find the source code on GitHub. I can provide you the link for that. So you can go and just check the source code for that. So it's completely open source, and it's cross-platform. It's actually very different from previous versions of ASP.NET that you might have been working on. So there are significant changes that we'll talk about as we move forward. So first of all, let's see what are the improvements of ASP.NET 5. So what are the advantages that you get when you use ASP.NET 5 compared to other versions? So this one is basically much lightweight compared to your previous ASP.NET versions. It has a modular HTTP request pipeline. It's very similar to your Web API concept of MVC, and MVC 6 is actually based on ASP.NET 5. As I talked about, you have the ability to host it on IIS, or you can self-host it on your own process. And then this is built on .NET Core, which supports true side-by-side app versioning. What that means is, like when you build a ASP.NET 5 application, you can target it to run on .NET Framework 4.6, which is the full version, or you can also target it to run on .NET Core. And you will know what are the features that will work and what are the features that will not work on .NET Core. So when you're building the applications, you can target it for multiple platforms, and then it can run depending on what version of .NET framework you're using when you actually deploy it. And it ships entirely as NuGet packages. So you might be familiar with NuGet packages, like whenever you have to import a library, so you use NuGet packages. Now, ASP.NET 5 is like completely based on NuGet packages, so you can add and remove any components that you want using your NuGet package manager. And it also has integrated support for creating and using NuGet packages. It has a single aligned web stack for Web UI and Web APIs. Now, in previous versions of ASP.NET, like if you've ever used MVC and Web API, then if you wanted to create an API, then you have to derive it from API controller. And if you want to create a controller that works with your views and everything, which has a UI, you have to create it from the MVC controller. Now, they have all combined it into one, so there is a single stack, so you don't have to use different versions. So you can just use the controller, and it can work for your Web UI as well as the Web API. And the other advantages are it's cloud-ready environment based configuration. That means that you can directly host ASP.NET 5 applications on Azure without making any major changes to your code or doing it. It's just one click on Visual Studio and it's up there running. And it has built-in support for dependency injection. So with MVC, you got dependency injection into your ASP.NET applications. Now with ASP.NET 5, it just goes to the next level. And as we talked about .NET Core and .NET Full Framework, you can now run ASP.NET applications on operating systems other than Windows, like Mac and Linux as well. And it's open source, community focused. The code is all available on GitHub. You can just go and check it out. So those are some of the improvements with ASP.NET 5. Let's talk about DNX. So DNX is nothing but .NET execution environment. It's a software development kit and runtime environment that has all the components that you need to run your .NET application for any operating system. So the DNX is your core of ASP.NET 5 applications. What are the features of DNX are like? It enables cross-platform development, and it provides you different flavors of .NET, like .NET Framework or .NET Core and Mono, so you can build applications on different platforms because of DNX. And then it actually simplifies the work needed to develop cross-platform applications. Package managers, they are completely changed the software development, and DNX actually makes it much easier to consume those packages. It's open source friendly, it is very easy to actually work with open source projects using DNX. So what happens is that, like, say for example, if you have a reference of a library, and if you want to replace it, you can directly get the source code and embed it into your project, and then it replaces that. So it's very open source friendly. So it's much easier to work with open source code using DNX .NET execution environment. So that's the core of your ASP.NET 5 applications, the DNX. Let's talk about the project structure of a ASP.NET 5 application. So when you create a new application of ASP.NET 5 in Visual Studio, you can see that there are some new things that you may not have seen when you actually created an ASP.NET or an ASP.NET MVC application of the previous versions. Now, what are these different things? We'll just go through them one by one. The first thing that you see is that there are two folders on a high level, which is the solution items and your SRC folder. The solution items has a global.json file. Now this global.json file actually has information about your solution itself, like what are the different projects in your solution, all that is stored in your global.json file. The SRC folder now has your project that contains the different projects of your solution. Now, if you see the web application, you see that there is a www root folder. Now, this is a special folder. Earlier, what used to happen in ASP.NET applications is that the root folder is nothing but, like, if you put a default.aspx in the root folder of your project, that becomes your default directory. And then that default.aspx used to appear in the root folder when you deploy it. Now, with this, it's a little different. Your www root is the root of your deployed application. So when you deploy it, whatever the contents you have in your www root folder, they go as your deployed package. So all the files such as your images, your JavaScript files, your style sheets and everything, you're going to put in your www root folder. So what difference this makes is that earlier, like when you have the root of your project as the root of your web application, now you had to write special permissions. Say, for example, if you have some sensitive files that you do not want to share when they get deployed, you had to write special permissions to prevent them from being rendered by IIS. Now, with this change, what happens is anything that you don't want to be rendered, all you have to do is you have to keep it out of www root. So anything that is outside of this folder will never be accessible using a browser. And everything inside it is only accessible. So it becomes more white box than black box. So you don't have to write any special things to prevent anything from going out. There is a new dependencies section. So this dependencies section is basically for your client-side dependencies. Now with modern applications, as you see, you use a lot of client-side libraries such as maybe jQuery or Angular or Bootstrap. All these you keep adding onto your projects. So to manage that, you have two managers, client-side package managers. One is your NPM, Node Package Manager, and the other one is Bower. So once you expand that, you can see both of those in the dependency section. With this, using this NPM or Bower, you can add your client-side dependencies. So once you add it, you can go to the www root. There will be a library folder, a lib folder, in which you can see all those client-side files that you have added using the dependencies. So that makes it easier to manage your client-side dependencies and the versioning and everything. There are several new files such as bar.json, app settings.json, gulp file, package.json, project.json, and startup.cs we're going to talk about. Bar.json is nothing but all the libraries that you have added using bar. It consists the version and the library that you have added. App settings is basically like the different settings for your project that you can write. Gulp file is basically it compiles your it executes like pre-compilation statements. So example, if you are using TypeScript and because it has to be converted to JavaScript before it is deployed. So what gulp file does is it does all that your pre-compilation things. So you can write code in that to do all pre-compilations that you want to do before the package is deployed, before the site is deployed. Package.json has all your NuGet packages that you have added, which is the normal process. So you see that references is there, and adding NuGet packages is very similar to adding NuGet packages to your previous versions of ASP.NET. So you can go to either the package manager console or the package manager and then add and remove NuGet packages. All that is stored in your package.json. There is project.json that has settings for your project, and the startup.cs file, which is important. We're going to talk about this in the next slide. So like, what is the code inside the startup.cs? Another important thing to note is that you do not have any files such as global.asax or packages.config or even web.config. I mean, I know everybody is surprised to know that there is no web.config in ASP.NET 5. The main reason being that because now you're building cross-platform web applications, so web.config, global.asax are more related to your IAS. So all these settings have been moved to different sections of the project. So you don't see this anywhere. So everything is there as part of other new configurations that have been added and that are not dependent on IAS. So that's why you don't see all of these files over here. So that's the typical project structure of a sample application that you can create, the first application that you will create using Visual Studio. Let's talk about the startup.cs file. So what this has is, if you see, there's a startup method, and here you can add all your settings. So whatever settings file that you have created, you can add here. So you can create a configuration builder and add a JSON file called app-settings.json, which will be the settings for your project. And then any configurations that you want to set for your development or production environment is much easier. You have a variable, a method which determines what environment you're running on. So if it's a development environment, you can have some settings. If it's a production environment, you can have different settings, right? So all these you can do in your startup.cs file. The next thing is configuration services. Now this method is used to specify like what services are available to the application. So the default template, if you see, is like when you create a new project in Visual Studio, by default you will see that it has helper methods to add variety of services such as entity framework or identity management or MVC. So you see in configuration services, like by default you're adding entity framework by using the connection string, and you can add identity management, like which provides authentication and authorization to your application. So, and then you're adding MVC if you're building an MVC application that allows you to add controllers, views, and all that good stuff. So here you're going to add all the services that are available to your ASP.NET 5 applications. So this is the default. You can add more services depending on your application. So if you want to add more services, you can add. So that gives you like complete flexibility of like what is there in your app by not allowing you to have everything bundled together. So you can pick and choose what you want. Lastly, finally, when you first run the application, the configure method is executed. Now this configure method actually has code to actually wire up, say for example, a console logger, or add other useful features such as support for static files, identity, and MVC routing. So routing earlier you used to do in your route.config file. So all of this will now go into your configure method. So you can set the default route of your MVC application in the configure method and add different other things such as how do you do exception handling, like you can add a path for the error, and how do you do logging for your application. All these can be configured in your configure method, or you can set all those properties here. So with that, we cover mostly like on a high level, like what is ASP.NET 5, how it is different from previous versions of ASP.NET, and how the project structure is completely different from compared to the older versions of ASP.NET. Now with that, I will just show you how to create a how to create an ASP.NET 5 application. So if you go to Visual Studio, it's basically very simple, like how you create any new project. So I say new project, you can see there are different templates that you have. So I choose web and I choose ASP.NET web application, say OK. And here you see you have the ASP.NET 4.5.2 templates. Now say for example, if you don't want to use ASP.NET 5 and you're comfortable with your the version that you have been using, so you can still go for that. You can choose your MVC, typical MVC application. Or what you can do is the new templates that you have is the ASP.NET 5 templates. Now here you can choose, you have three options. One is the empty one. This by default is a blank project that you can create, and then you will have to add everything on your own. This is a web API that you want to create, just the API with no UI. If you want to create a project like that, then you choose a web API. And finally, the web application. This is a typical MVC application per se. So it'll add everything that you need for a web application that works like an MVC application in ASP.NET 5. You can choose the authentication as you do normally the forms or AD authentication. And once you say OK, you'll see that you'll have the same project structure as I showed you in the slides. So that's all I wanted to cover today. And with that, we will just move on to any question and answers that you may have. So you can use the chat window. Yeah.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks for the quick overview on the ASP.NET 5. Yes, we have a few questions coming from the audience. So the first question is like, do we have all the features of ASP.NET 5 available on all the operating systems like Mac, Linux, and Windows?
The answer to that would be like on Windows, because you're running on .NET Framework 4.6, you get all the features that are available on ASP.NET. But when you're working on different operating systems like Mac or Linux, when you're working on .NET Core, which is basically a subset of your .NET full framework, so the features are still limited compared to Windows. But as it grows, you will get more variety and more features as it keeps going. But now you won't get the exact same features as you get in your full framework. So it's slightly limited.
Thank you. Thank you. So here's the other question. So what are some of the new features in Visual Studio for ASP.NET 5 developers?
Yes, there are many features in Visual Studio 2015. Like one good example that I can give is, say for example, you are using AngularJS, right? So there was no IntelliSense for AngularJS when you start working with Visual Studio. So now with Visual Studio 2015 and ASP.NET 5, you get complete IntelliSense for AngularJS. So when you do a dot, you get all the methods that are available for that class. And then you have boilerplate templates that you can use to create your modules and controllers in AngularJS. So there are many new features for client-side development that you will find. Like I talked about dependencies also, where you have npm, bower, gulp file, all these available for client-side development. So there's a lot of improvement on that side comparatively.
Thanks, Amit. I think we will also cover more on the Visual Studio 2015 in our next webinar and on Jan 20th. Okay. So I have another questions like how to create ASP.NET 5 web apps in Visual Studio Code. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Yeah.
Yeah, Visual Studio Code is available for Mac. You can install that. It's a lighter version of Visual Studio for Windows. So once you install that, you can create web applications. I mean ASP.NET 5 applications that can run on Mac operating system.
Thanks, Amit. So I have another question for the day. So can you elaborate a little bit on the project JSON file in ASP.NET 5?
Yeah, the project JSON file has all the settings for your projects. Is one of the configurations that you have. So earlier you used to have only web.config, where you used to have all the configuration for the project, but now all that has moved to different files, and project.json is one of them.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks for the wonderful session. I hope our audience here has enjoyed it. So just to highlight, folks, again, we are hosting a series of webinars on .NET starting this week. As you can see, our next topic for the webinar is getting started with Visual Studio 2015 and C#60. So keep watching for it. I like people who have already attended and registered. You will be already there on our list. You will get those link to join the webinar soon. So if you have further questions or clarifications, you can write to us at marketing@winwire.com and we'll come back to you as early as possible. Thank you, Amit. Have a good day. Thanks everyone for joining this session.
Thanks, Noor. Thanks everyone for joining. Look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.